This is a Ghetto Geek establishment. Ghetto Geeks, stand up.
Yes, it's GhettogeekTV. We're live here at Word Up, Harsden Picture Palace, and we've got the one and only amazing headliner, JJ Bola. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Speaking of familiar faces, the girl next door who would eventually grow up to be my mother, the fruit seller at the market, the lonely man at the top of the road who nobody spoke to, and our house at the bottom of the street, lit up by a single flickering lamp where beyond was only darkness there. They would sit and tell stories of monsters that lurked and came only at night, to catch the children who sat and listened to stories of monsters that lurked. This is how they lived. Each memory buried.
You absolutely killed that last set, your headline set there.
Thank you.
What was one of your little highlights that you kind of felt your experience, well, you're a Northwest guy anyway,
Yeah.
coming to Word Up for the first time?
You know, I used to live not far from here actually.
Okay.
And
Like
I
area
lived
wise?
just off Church Road.
Oh, off
right?
Church Road?
Yeah, I
Okay,
lived just,
nice,
so I
nice.
know the area well.
Nice.
But I'd gone past the palace so many times and actually never been inside.
Yeah, you're not alone.
So then, like, having moved away, right, it's like,
Unless
right,
it's Word Up older.
right, do you know what I mean?
Keep it real.
And it's such a shame because
Yeah.
often, you know, and we subconsciously do these things where we judge a building
Yes.
from the outside.
Damn.
We judge people
Talk about it.
from the outside,
Yeah.
and so on and so on. And even me as someone who encourages people,
Yeah.
right, to go beyond the periphery, beyond the exterior, I still have these notions that I've internalized. And so having moved away, so I moved away about a year ago,
Okay.
and then coming back here felt like a homecoming.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my gosh, I remember the emotions and the experiences I used to have just walking down the road, some of the frustrations, and then just coming and seeing firstly, how diverse the crowd was,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And just how the open mic, I think, is incredible because to have an open mic and a free night, like I said before, is something that's so rare nowadays amongst the poetry scene.
This idea of male identity. Like, tell me a little bit about what your views were that inspired you about that.
Yeah, well, essentially, masculinity is a construct, right? And
Like sociology
right,
and rap.
exactly.
Connell.
It's a construct, and to almost like the fulfillment of that construct requires performance, right? So it's in its everyday aspect, it's very performative. And from a young age, you get told what the requirements are for that performance to be successful, right?
Yeah.
So even if it's simple as boys don't cry,
Yes.
man up, right?
Yeah.
Two essential things that probably every boy around the world has heard. Man up, boys don't cry, man. So you internalize that, and that begins to manifest in different aspects of your life. And then you don't really critique it or reflect on it until you're brought into a situation that actually challenges you to. So I remember, for instance, one of the key things that made me question my masculinity. I mean, beyond some of the books I read, you know, there's a really good book called We Real Cool by Bell Hooks that talks about specifically black masculinity, which is amazing, really opened up my eyes. But just like in the everyday circle, one of the things that really opened up my, kind of made me self-reflect about masculinity was when I had traveled to India, and in Indian culture, it's quite normal for the men to hold hands and to be really touchy and affectionate. It's normal, right? So some of the guys that we were there with and gotten to know, I remember we were going to the cinema and we were walking down the street holding hands, right? And a lot of the other guys were doing it. There were groups of men just holding hands. And naturally I felt uncomfortable because that's not what I'm used to. It wasn't my norm at all. But if I kind of resist, then, you know, that's kind of quite rude, disrespectful towards their culture. So, you know, I kind of thought to myself, why do I feel so uncomfortable? You know, they were just holding hands. Every other man here is doing it. And I just think of that contrast with, imagine walking down the road, imagine walking through Harsden and seeing a whole bag of guys just holding hands, you know. It can't compute, I can't even imagine it. And then it's those everyday experiences that makes you challenge yourself and think, okay, what is it that I find normal? What is it that, you know, is natural to me and what isn't natural to me? You know, what is it that I've been internalizing as a result of like societal norms, and what is it that is actually my own genuine kind of life experience and my own genuine kind of representation of my personality and who I am. So that's why I wrote that poem really, to kind of like get us as men, you know, self-reflecting, because we rarely get the opportunity to do so, and just kind of moving beyond the limitations of masculinity, the limitations of what it means to be a man.
That's so powerful. I think that the last lines within that poem was it says, there are no real men, just men that are real.
Yeah, and so you just have to be real, like, you know, let's just take away all the lies, all the facades and so on, and just be, who are you really? Yes. You know, beneath all the layers that you present yourself. Because I remember growing up as a young person and you know, wearing my jeans low and wearing, you know, hood up and whatever, and screw face, and I remember all of that. I did all that. I performed all of that, even though, right? And it's ironic because even though I at the time knew it wasn't me, because as a 15-year-old boy presenting all of that, I loved reading books. Like, I loved books. I would go home to rush to read a book, and I loved it. I was like, you know, ghetto geek. I loved that. That was me. Like, you know, we would discuss poetry and stuff and whatever. I would just be like, yeah, I loved it, but I couldn't admit it. Do you know what I mean? Because it makes you seem like you're soft. It seem like, you know, you're vulnerable, and you don't want that. That's not what it means to be a man.
A lot of the schools that I've sort of supported as well in Wembley area actually, have quite a lot of Eastern European kind of links and everything. And I was just wondering, like, how does, like, I don't know, the idea of like Romania link to you and your experiences of like the refugee process as someone who's had to seek refuge from Congo and all the rest of it. I think linking the stories of like Congo, Romania, you know, we'd love you to hear that.
The thing with you know, the immigrant or refugee story, right, is there is no single story.
No.
Right? There is no two stories that are exactly the same. There is none that can be repeated exactly the same as the other. Each story is unique in its own right. And regardless of the stereotypes and the labels and so on, which growing up is something that I had to, you know, deal with, because you know, you're not aware of it as a 10-year-old boy, 12-year-old thing, that you are a refugee, that there's this political, almost, there's this like political kind of dagger dangling above your head that's just going to fall at any point, right? And everyone else can see it.
You weren't aware of it?
No, we weren't aware, you know, and our parents would try to, parents are trying to, and I can understand that. It's a traumatic experience. You know, my parents fled Congo at the onset of essentially what would turn out to be the beginning of the war. So, and that was under the dictatorship of President Mobutu, right? So it was like they had to make a decision there and then. And so they protected us, the children. That's one part is, that doesn't get spoken about, is actually how parents are just trying to make a better life, you know, and that's the most relatable experience for everyone in the world. We're all just trying to improve ourselves somehow, just be in a better situation.
Comedy in between.
To be honest, you just did a sick comedy set within your poetry.
Yeah, people always like the unemployed line. I think people relate to it. I did genuinely always think when I graduated that I was freelance.
Yes.
And then I rang up HMRC and was like, how do I register for being freelance? They were like, are you working at the moment? I was like, no. And they were like, well, you're not freelance, you're just unemployed. It's like, burn.
I went there and performed that poem, and while I was performing that line, I remembered why I wrote that line. Because at school, there was a group of boys, right, that would that had this chant. There was like 10, 15, whatever there was of them. And every time they saw me at recess, lunchtime, down the hall, they would be like, dirty Arab, dirty Arab, again and again and again and again in unison, right? That would be great in a choir, but that would pretty messed up there, right?